Let's talk about another one of Toronto's cold cases. Well, it's no longer a cold case. It was solved in 2015, but it took 25 years to solve. So let's go back to November 19th of 1990. It was at a gas station at Brimley and Danforth. It used to be called Penny Gas Bar. I'm not sure if it's, still there, or maybe it is still there and they renamed it or something. I don't know. But it was on November 19th, 1990. A customer had come in and she was trying to pump gas. Now, back in those days, actually, they're still doing it now, or they recently started back, where you would have to pay for your gas first before you can pump. So she got there and she realized, okay, the attendant isn't there. So she began to walk around the gas station looking for him. And she happened to find him in the man's washroom. I think his body was like maybe lying halfway in between or whatever. She happened to see him. But 911 was called and they began to investigate. But, back in 1990, there's no cameras. And even if there were, the quality would not have been that great to identify anybody anyways. So they began canvassing the area. They identified a house, like where you can see the perpetrators had ran through or something.
Homicide detectives were on the scene early this morning. A station attendant at the Penny Gas Bar had been found beaten and stabbed in the station's washroom. The motive unknown. By daylight, detectives and forensics officers combed the area, lifting fingerprints from the glass casing on the cash booth where the attendant had been working. Around a nearby corner, police were stationed at a house, a yellow crime scene tape barring access to the driveway. The suspect apparently fled through here after running from the gas station.
But, after 3 years, there was no leads, no tips, and the case, became a cold case. So they put the items in storage, like the knife that the victim was attacked with was found at the scene, and there was a bloody fingerprint in the washroom. And that's all they had, basically. So they put those in storage and, it just sat there for 25 years. And in 2015, Toronto police opened a new task force, which they call, I think, Never Give Up, where they would go back and look at all the cases that had the potential of being solved. So cases with, had fingerprint evidence or DNA evidence. They were retesting everything to see if there was a hit with any of them. And they got a hit. 3 months after they started the project, they got a hit on the cold case of Surinder Singh Parmar. He was the man that was killed back in November of 1990. They arrested a 61-year-old man by the name of Rupert Richards. I don't have any pictures, which I hate. I don't have any pictures of the perpetrator, but his name was Rupert Richards, 61 years old at the time, living in West End, Toronto. And when police showed up for him, he was shocked. He was surprised. Like, could you imagine? He knew he had committed a crime, but he had gotten away with it for 25 years. So he's chilling, he's cool, he thinks he's, he was known to police. He had prior arrests for domestic abuse, drug offenses, refusing a breathalyzer. But in 2012, 3 years prior, to the task force being launched, he was convicted of DUI. So that's when his fingerprints went into the system, and that's what caught him. Now let's talk a bit more about the victim. He was 37 years old. He was married. He had 2 children, ages 6 and 12, a boy and a girl. And he had came to Canada from India in June of 1990. He was looking for a better life for his children, but he wanted to test out the waters here first before he decided to, uproot them and bring them from India. He was a principal back there. He had a PhD in history. His wife was also a teacher. So, like I said, he came here in June of 1990. He visited the West Coast because he had some friends there. But finally, he settled in Toronto, and he had just recently gotten that job at the gas bar, working by himself, working the night shift. And police believe that it was a robbery attempt because a small amount of cash was taken. It wasn't a whole lot because he more than likely started his shift at 11 o'clock. And he was found at 1:15 in the morning. So there wasn't a huge gap in time turnover of a lot of money. So, and he was, depending on which publication that you read, he was stabbed at least 34 to 35 times, all in the upper body area and the torso area. And his family did end up migrating here. They came here in 1990, you know, for his funeral, and they end up staying. So police believe that Rupert had a co-accused, which they have identified as his cousin Delroy Buckingham, I think it's how it's pronounced, but he was deported to Jamaica in 1994 for drug offenses. Arrest warrant has been put out for his arrest, but he's not coming back to Canada anytime soon. He's not coming back. And police, I doubt they're going to try and go back to Jamaica and, you know, get him to come back here for trial. Rupert pled guilty to manslaughter in 2018, and he was given a 12-year sentence. But he was given 51 months for time served for the time that he had spent in jail leading up to the trial. So he would only have 7 years and I think about 9-10 months left to serve, which he's coming up on that. But, you know, sometimes they release people from jail early. I'm not sure if he's out or if he's still there, but whenever he is released, he will be deported back to Jamaica. He was 61 years old at the time of the crime. And you've been living in Canada for all these years and you didn't think to, you know, become a Canadian citizen. Either way, I'm not, you know, I don't feel bad for him. He got what he deserved. You took the life of this man for what? A small amount of money. The police have never identified how much they think it was. And Rupert admitted that, yes, I knew my co-accused had a knife on him that night, but I didn't think things were going to get out of hand. It wasn't planned that we were going to go in there and, you know, unalive somebody. So his cousin got away with it. You know, yes, he was deported back to Jamaica, but he's been living free for all these years. And then now you in your 60s have to go to jail. And then you're going to, you know, get deported, you know, in your later years where we know things are hard. But anyways, I'm not feeling sorry for him because the victim's family has suffered. Like I said, his wife was also a teacher in India. And then when she came here, she had to go work in factories to, you know, provide for her children. She was now a single mother. And in her impact statement, she says that she thinks that her children could have had a better life had their father been around, which they probably would have, you know. But it's a sad story. And it took 25 years to solve, like I said. But that just goes to show, like, don't give up hope for families that are out there wanting their crimes to be solved. It might take a long time, but with the new technology nowadays that are coming up, there's a high possibility that things, you know, could be solved and families can get answers. But have you guys ever heard about this case?
Thank you and good morning. The following are the circumstances surrounding the murder of Surinder Singh Parmar. Mr. Parmar was 38 years old at the time of his death. On Monday, November 19th, 1990, 25 years ago, almost to the day, at 1:15 a.m., the deceased was found in the men's washroom of a building situated on the gas bar lot called the Penny Gas Bar at 1039 Danforth Road in Scarborough. The deceased had been stabbed. The motive for the murder appeared to be robbery. It appears a very violent struggle took place in the confines of a small bathroom located at this gas bar. The deceased was the night shift attendant for the gas bar. He began his work at 11 o'clock on the prior Sunday night, and the body was discovered by a customer who had stopped for gas after work. She went to the gas station and purchased gas and found that the attendant was not in the kiosk and went and checked the bathroom and subsequently called the police. The washroom was located some 30 meters away from the kiosk where one would normally pay for gas. Back in 1990, the gas business was a mainly cash business. We did not use pay at the pump back in the time, so it was mainly a cash business back then. Members of 41 Division and Criminal Investigation Bureau attended and began the initial investigation. At the time, Detective Sergeant James Crowley and Detective Chris Wilson of the Homicide Squad attended the scene and took charge of the homicide investigation. Both of these investigators have since retired from the Toronto Police. An autopsy was performed on November 19, 1990, The cause of death was determined to be multiple stab wounds. The deceased entered Canada on June 11th, 1990 from India on a visitor's pass. He was residing with a relative at the time of his death and planned on returning to India in January of the next year. Surinder Singh Parmar left a widow, a daughter 12 years old at the time, and a son 6 years old at the time. They were still residing in India. Mr. Parmar was a headmaster and school teacher in India and had completed his PhD in history. He came from India to explore Canada as a place to live with his family. While he was here, he took a job at the gas station to pass time and to have some extra spending money. He did not like to be an idle man. His wife and children had to travel to Canada for the funeral. They settled in Ontario after the funeral. His children, now 25 years later, are grown-up, hard-working members of this community. They continued to wonder about what had happened to their father. They were shocked when we called them a few weeks ago to give them an update on the investigation after all these years, having no contact. A number of months ago, Detective Henry Marsman of the Cold Case Unit was assigned this investigation. A review of the evidence in this case was conducted and certain investigative steps were taken certain investigative steps were taken in regards to evidence that was located at the time of the original investigation. In conjunction with members of our Forensic Identification Unit and the Center of Forensic Sciences, items were re-examined. This is evidence that had been sitting in case boxes on a shelf for years, just waiting for its turn. As this case is still under investigation now and before the courts, as you know, I cannot give you further details about the evidence. As a result of those examinations, the accused was identified and arrested yesterday morning. The accused, Rupert Richards, is now 61 years of age. At the time of the offense, he would have been 36 years old. Richards is not in the workforce. He was unemployed. Richards was arrested outside his home in the west end of Toronto, where he resided alone. He was taken into custody without incident and transported to 41 Division. Yesterday afternoon, he made his first court appearance at Scarborough Courts on the charge of first-degree murder. We have since been in contact with the family, and they expressed their gratitude that arrest was finally made after all this time. The victim's children were very young at the time of their father's death. To go 25 years without knowing who did this to their father was very difficult for them to cope with. The family has requested privacy, and they respectfully do not wish to speak to the media at this time. If you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer those.
Was the suspect known to police in any other way?
He was known to police. We've had contact with him on several occasions. So yes, he was known to police.
Can you elaborate on how you contacted him?
He'd been arrested in the past, and he'd been investigated in the past by the police for various occurrences at his place of residence, noise complaints, things like that.
Violence?
He had been investigated for domestic violence in the past, yes.
Was he ever a suspect in this case?
No, he was not.
So can you just elaborate on what was it that broke this case open for you?
Well, again, it's forensic evidence. I can't go into the specifics of what that forensic evidence is because it's before the courts, but you can tell there are a number of different types of forensic evidence that we use. We spoke about the examination in these cases. We're looking at DNA and fingerprint evidence. Those both played a part in this case.
DNA and fingerprint evidence from Mr. Rupert?
From the crime scene, yes.
So during his previous interactions with police, the numerous times that you've investigated him, would fingerprints and DNA have been collected then? Or is that how it kind of...
Not every time we have an interaction with anybody do we take fingerprints or DNA. It's only on certain occasions where we're allowed to take DNA, and the same with fingerprints. I can't go into, again, the specifics about how or why we have those at this point, but I can say that forensic examinations did lead to the arrest of Mr. Richards.
But you can say that you had his DNA on file from a previous contact you had with police?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, let's go back to this robbery. Can you give us an idea of what was taken?
The robbery was for cash. It was a very small amount of cash in terms of the day. I won't release the exact amount, but it was a small amount of cash.
If there was a robbery, how did they end up in the bathroom of the gas station?
Unfortunately, we don't have any surveillance video back from this time, and Mr. Parmar was a sole employee of the location. That was the only bathroom for employees or customers to use. So it would be speculation to say how it ended up back there.
But there was no indication of a struggle that started at a gas bar and then ended with Mr. Parmar's body being left in the bathroom. You think that he was killed in the bathroom?
Yes, he was killed in the bathroom, yes.
Was Mr. Richards ever a suspect, like at the onset, right after the murder?
No, he was not.
Can you comment on his reaction when being arrested 25 years after the fact was accused of accident?
I would say he was surprised to see us there from homicide. Again, he'd had previous interactions with the police, but when we showed up and identified ourselves as where we were from, I think he was quite surprised to see us.
Were the interactions with the police before the murder or after the murder?
After the murder.
Can you talk a little bit more too about, I know you mentioned that they were surprised, but what the victim's family, a little bit more about what those conversations were like, both when you updated them a few weeks ago and with news of the arrest?
Yes, we had the son and daughter come in to see us to give them a preliminary update that we were investigating the case. And being their ages now, back when this originally happened, they were 6 and 12 years old. You can imagine they would have had no information from their family and relatives at that age. Pretty much they said they were left in the dark back then because you don't really discuss those type of things with a 6-year-old or a 12-year-old about the circumstances. So over the years, they had minimal information given to them about the investigation and where it was left. When they came in, they were very, very surprised to, first of all, have heard from us that we were calling them in, and second of all, that the case was actually still under investigation. They were very happy that it was, but at the same time, they were in a state of disbelief, I think, that after all these years, there could possibly be a resolution. And yesterday, when we contacted them to tell them that an arrest was made, again, they were very grateful, very happy that we did pursue it and that we did make an arrest in the case. But I think it brings back for them old memories of what it was like back then for them when they first initially found out their father had been murdered in Toronto. And so I think it really stirs up a lot of emotions for the family. And I think it's hard for them to cope with it, and that's why right now they're respectfully requesting some privacy at this time.
Is anyone else still around?
Yes. Mother and the 2 children live in the GTA.
Or for the staff inspector, sir, you said this was one of the first ones we reviewed. Can we expect to see you guys doing this more frequently now?
Well, this is part of the initiative, is to, as I say, methodically go through our old case boxes. It's very time-consuming. We don't want to miss anything. And we want to make sure that we identify the right cases where the samples exist, that we can further our investigations, whether it be through DNA examination or through the new fingerprint technology now that we now are utilizing and has been successful in other investigations before today. So yeah, it'll take some time, but we're going to keep moving forward.
In this case, the information that led to the arrest, ultimately, either of you can answer this one. Was it a matter of re-examining things that had already been examined, or was it performing new tests that maybe weren't available in 1990?
It's a little bit of both. Re-examining evidence that we had collected and preserved back at the time of the original investigation, and with new technology, things that didn't exist back in 1990, we were able to apply new testing techniques, and it helped in both areas. New tests on old evidence and basically new things that were not around back in 1990. DNA wasn't around back in 1990 for us to really utilize in this fashion.
I don't. You probably. It's tough to get into this, but what led you to, the accused? Because you have the DNA from the scene, but you need to run the DNA on the accused, to find a match. Can you talk about what led to, you know, doing that test and matching it with Richard's?
Well, when we speak of DNA, don't forget that we have the victim's DNA as well, and that is a primary person that we would have had DNA from to confirm that is, in fact, his DNA that was there. I can't go into the investigative steps that we took to determine that it was, in fact, Mr. Richards, but it was a number of steps that led us there, and unfortunately, due to the investigation being before the courts now, I really can't get into that.
Can you talk about the accused's life or lifestyle at the time of the murder? Was he employed at that time? What was he like?
I don't know the details back 25 years ago on his employment status or what he was doing. And again, I can't really go into too much of his background. He's before the courts now, and I assume that will come out during the course of a trial or a preliminary hearing.
How long ago did this review start on this case?
On this case in particular, we started the review in August of this year.
So Richards thought he got away with it. There's lots of other people in the cold case maybe think they got away with it.
That's right, and that's, you know, what we're looking at here is we have cases in the cold case unit that we actually have DNA profiles that link them to a crime. We have their DNA, we know who it is, except we don't have the name. Their DNA tells us who it is. We have a number of cases like that we're looking for the public to come forward and say, I know something about that case, I know who may be responsible. We can then go out and obtain DNA samples from those people and hopefully link it to another case. That evidence is there, we have it, and it's just waiting for a name.
Any more questions?
The website, you mentioned the website. When is that supposed to be revamped?
Yeah, it takes a great deal of effort to put it all together to make the website complete. We don't want to put it out unless it's as complete as we can get it. It's going to involve a lot of photographs. There's going to be some details of the investigation that are on there. That stuff's already been put together and ready for release, but there's a number of things that we have to do in order to ensure that it's complete before we put it out.
Option to provide a tip, I guess? Is that something that would be part of it?
That's in the works. The whole thought process behind the website is, one, to ensure that loved ones of people that are victimized by homicides know that we have not forgotten about their particular case. To also attract or cultivate information from members of the public to say, geez, that one's not solved yet. I have some information that might put them in the right direction, and as Detective Sergeant Gallant has said, we do have profiles, crime scene profiles of people. We just don't know what name to put to it. So all we need is that one little piece of information that we're missing in order to make the investigation go in a complete circle so we can prosecute these people. So we'll determine what's significant and what's not. People may have information and they may not think it's significant, but it may be very, very, very helpful in the investigation. So we're hoping that in the absence of a website, anybody that has any information on a historical or current homicide investigation to contact us, and there's many ways in which you can do that, but we're hoping that we can move forward on some of these older cases.